Welcome to the Face to Face podcast, your go-to resource for living a life of vitality, wholeness, and authenticity. I am one of your hosts, Melinda Wilson.
And I'm your other host, Cathy Little. Join us as we explore deeper connection, lasting freedom, and meaningful relationships with God, others, and your true self. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome back.
We are so glad that you're listening, whether this is your 160-something episode.
I say we might be at 170 now.
Oh my gosh. Or if it's your first time, we're so glad that you're listening. Welcome to the Face to Face podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much. We're actually continuing our conversation with Suhail Stephen. And this episode's actually going to address the Enneagram, which has been really super helpful in my own formation and development. I really appreciate that. But Melinda, how many spots do we have left for Dashaway?
We have 3 spots left in Dashaway.
Just
and
3.
I feel that someone listening right now is like itching to go, or there's something in you that is pushing you. And I don't know if you're on the other side of the country or not, but this is somewhere that you need to be at.
Yes.
For your
Please
healing
come.
and transformation and connection with your own heart, with others, and with Jesus.
Got some great stuff going on. And then we do have our Understanding Trauma course live now, which we're really excited about. A lot of great feedback from it. Just a really great overview of a lot of different aspects of trauma in one place. And also our level 1 and level 2 registrations open at emmanuelinstitute.com. So check that out. But in the meantime, let's enjoy some more with Suhail Stephen and learn a little bit about the Enneagram and other things.
All right, away we go.
Suhail, we have already had a fantastic conversation about spirituality, spiritual direction. And there's this other piece that I know you have in your pocket about the Enneagram. And it's a topic that I've wanted to bring on the show for a while because of how impactful it has been for me, which ironically, when I first heard about the Enneagram, I was pretty convinced I was one of 2 numbers and then leaned to one particular number. And then we had some friends who lived with us and the wife was the number I thought I was. And I'm like, one of us is not that number.
Right.
And her husband, who is very well versed in the Enneagram, laughed at me and he said, "You think?" And then he started pointing out these other things I wasn't aware of because he and I share a number. So it was really interesting. And I think this can happen, is that the number you don't want to be is probably the one you are.
Yes, that is common.
So I'm like, oh, I don't want to be this number. Oh, and then I became friends with it and began to see it for the gift it was and the gift that it has been to me throughout my entire life. And also looking at the work that I've done so that I'm not an unhealthy version of that, but I actually have, I've had some pretty major healing seasons in my life that delineate my life from before this and after this. And in the after this, embracing the journey of becoming who I was always meant to be has been the gift of that. And understanding the Enneagram has helped. It's also helped relationally when you're with other people and understanding what makes them tick. So I would love to turn you loose on that one, Suhail, to maybe give some history behind it, because some people, like I may have mentioned this at the beginning of the other episode, that some people, especially in the church world, think it's new age or it's hooey gooey or it's, it's evil. People get afraid of things they don't understand. So if you could help us understand the value, understand the history, where it's come from, and maybe do a little bit of flyover for us.
Yeah, sure. Well, again, I just have to disclaim, and this is not false humility. This is actually true. I really don't feel like that much of an expert in the Enneagram. I mean, I've read a couple books and of course it features in our curriculum. So I know that there are people out there who are much more versed in it and much more proficient at kind of talking about it and stuff. What I will say, though, is that my own experience with the Enneagram has really helped me. It's really helped me understand myself. And like you said, Cathy, it's really helped me to understand what is motivating other people, especially when those people feel so baffling to me. Because I can kind of have a grid for what's motivating me and why I am the way I am. I mean, I live with myself and I've reflected on myself. So there's some degrees of blossoming awareness, but the Enneagram has been really helpful to understand what might be going on in other people, like what's driving them, what's motivating them, you know? And actually, this past year, I sort of experimented with coming up with a framework that fit me more authentically, like the language that maybe I would use, and even a more satisfying Christian framework for the Enneagram. So that's what I'll talk about, is like my own little hand at this, although it's very well informed by other people's work. So in terms of the history, well, it is a vague history, and I think it's true to acknowledge that vagueness can be unsettling. We don't actually know where this comes from, whether it's Eastern thinking or spirituality or it's Western. We're not really sure. We do know it's largely been an oral tradition down through history. And we also do know that Christians have used it and appropriated it. And there's a lot of, especially in the last decades, a lot of conversation around spiritual formation that features the Enneagram. And so I would say the trend is there's less suspicion about it. I think in part because people are realizing how helpful it is for themselves and in terms of others. It's hard to fault that. But I do want to say very clearly that the origin story of the Enneagram is largely unknown to us. I mean, we kind of know how it came to North America and stuff, but it wasn't a decidedly Christian endeavor, you know. So I guess what I want to say is I do understand sometimes people's hesitation or even aversion to the Enneagram because it's not explicitly Christian in its origin story or even how it was popularized in North America. And at the same time, I would also like to say that if it carries something that is truthful and helpful, and specifically that helps us to love ourselves more authentically and to love others more authentically, I think that's very part and parcel of the greatest commandments of the gospel, you know? And that has been the case for me. Like, it has helped me to love myself more, to bring more of myself into the love of God, and to love other people more authentically. So that is why I would say, for me personally, that is why I would commend it as a tool and as a framework for Christians, because it coheres with some of our deepest values about what it means to be Christian, that ethic of love, I guess you could say. So that being said, the first time I came across it was in the School of Spiritual Direction. It was training to become a director, and it was part of the unit on our self-awareness. The idea being that if we're not aware of what is going on in us, our motivations, our strengths, as well as our shadows, then we can't bring those things intentionally to God, right? Like if I pretend that, for example, I don't have any grief or trauma, despite this stuff that has happened to me, then I don't open up that grief and trauma to the love and the presence and the truth and the freedom of God. Like whatever I keep hidden, either from unawareness or intention, is something that God, out of respect for human agency, will not just, charge through and break open. Like God is waiting for us to disclose ourselves in authenticity and in a spirit of truth, right? And so the Enneagram helped me to do that, first and foremost. But I was very resistant to the Enneagram because, as it turns out, I am a 4 on the Enneagram, and we do not like to be boxed in. We like to be unique and special. And our identity rises and falls based on the degree to which we feel unique or special. So I always bristled at every single kind of personality test because I always felt like nothing will suitably describe me because I'm unique and special. I'm a pretty little snowflake. So how dare you try to put me into a Myers-Briggs or whatever, Well, wouldn't you know that the Enneagram sort of called me out on that, because it helped me realize there is a strong drive in me, a compulsion actually, to be unique, to avoid being ordinary. And when I saw that, it was like you were saying, Cathy, I was mortified. Am I really the kind of person that needs to be unique, like to feel special for some reason? Like I really can't tolerate being ordinary. is that really who I am? Have I been this petty my whole life? Is that why I've always hated personality tests? And the answer was yes. I was called out. I was found out for what was motivating me at a very deep level. And I had never resonated with a personality rubric like that. I had never been so specifically pointed out for what was driving me at a very core level and why. The why was really telling, because the why for a 4 who's in what we call the heart triad, and the language that I've been playing with this past year is like that each of these triads, where the head, the heart, and the gut triad, there's 9 types of personality, and each of those types are grouped into 3, a triad. And so for someone like me who's a 4, who's in the heart triad, the undercurrent, which is the word I'll use, and I'll explain that in a second, the undercurrent is shame. Something fundamentally wrong with who I am. There's something about me inherently that is not right, or that is deficient, or that is less than. I may not know exactly what it is, but it's always this feeling that I carry around. And based on the story that I didn't know that this would tie in, but based on the story that I told you of being called a dog, I think in part, gave me this deep embedded sense of shame from a very young age that I've carried with me in a lot of ways. And because of that undercurrent of shame, one of my coping mechanisms, or one of the compulsions, is that I have to be unique. I have to be special, because if I'm special, then people will love me. They'll give me attention. They will somehow antidote that feeling or experience of shame that I carry around. And in a similar way, I have to avoid at all costs being ordinary. Because if I'm just one of the crowd, nobody will pay attention to me, and therefore nobody will bring any kind of respite to my shame, right? So the reason I call it an undercurrent of shame, and all of the triads have their undercurrent, but the reason I use that word undercurrent in the framework that I was playing with this year is because it's something underneath the surface that we may not know about, we cannot see, we cannot detect, but has a significant play or force in what happens. Like you can think of a boat on a lake or in the ocean, and on the surface of that water, it looks calm and still, but the boat is being pulled this way and that, and you don't know why. Well, that's what the undercurrents in the Enneagram function like. There are these things below the surface of our awareness often that have a large force in pushing and pulling us in various ways in our life, So I didn't even know that I carried shame about being from India till I was like 25 or 27. Imagine living like 2 decades without even knowing, without even having a name for this experience that I was carrying in my body, That's why it's an undercurrent, right? So the compulsion, that word that I've been playing with as well, that comes out of the undercurrent. Like given the shame, for example, for the heart triad, what do I feel I must do or avoid in order to cope with that shame? And that also can sometimes be somewhat under the surface of the awareness. That's why I was so grateful for the Enneagram, because it helped me recognize what I think was always going on, but I wasn't aware of. Right. So yeah, more to say on that, but let me stop and see what you want to say here.
Well, I like your language already on it, so I'm curious to hear about the rest of them. And I just realized that we have all 3 triads represented on the screen right now.
Are you a 1, Cathy?
I thought I was for a long time, but I am not.
You're not. Okay.
No.
So you are in the gut triad then, because I know Melinda's in the head.
Yep.
So are you an 8? Okay, right on.
Yep. Which is why I didn't want to be one.
I like my number. I just want to say, if I looked at all of them, that's the one I would pick. So
of course you would.
Well, I like my number now, but I didn't like it when I first heard it.
No,
So
I
understand
actually
that.
thought I was a 1 or a 2, but I am an 8 and I go to 2 in health. So that's where the pastoral heart comes from, and my ability to, I think, really just be with people in a tune and serve and things like that. But I have a 9 wing, which balances me out. It's interesting because I have been more intentional in the past few months to tap into the other side of me, which is the 7 energy and the 7 wing. And I have to be intentional and give it permission in my life, that kind of thing. But I do have that 9 wing. And so now we're throwing around numbers and people might not have a clue.
Please, Suhail, give it 9, 7. Am I a 42? Yeah, please give us however you want to kind of give us not encyclopedia, just some kind of definition of the numbers would be awesome.
Yeah, sure. Well, as I said, the Enneagram is, it's so called because it takes the words in Greek, ennea and gram. Ennea means 9, like the number 9, and gram is like a gramma is the word for, a diagram or some sort of framework. So at a very basic level, actually it's Ennea, I should say. My Greek pronunciation should be better than Ennea.
I was going to correct you, actually.
I know. I didn't want to let that go without correcting myself.
Right.
As long as we don't call it enema, I think we're fine. But
I feel like that.
The enemagram.
It could feel like
it does.
To some
That's
people,
right.
For sure.
That's right. But anyway, ennea and gramma are the words in Greek to describe what the Enneagram framework is. So 9 personality types kind of represented in a diagram or a pictorial form. Okay, so each of those 9 types, the numbers 1 through 9, denote a certain kind of personality type. And like I said, each of the 9 types are subcategorized into 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So we call those triads. So we have the heart triad, which is numbers 2, 3, and 4. We have the head triad, which is numbers 5, 6, and 7. And we have the gut triad, which is numbers 8, 9, and 1. So, without going too deep into what the triads mean, it's basically just a way to group similar numbers based on their undercurrent and some of the ways they show up in their personal or interpersonal relationships. So as I said, the heart triad, numbers 2, 3, and 4, to use the language that I've been using, the undercurrent for those folks is shame. That's the thing that's going to be very relevant to them, but often under the surface of their awareness that will affect how they relate to and process and experience life. For the head triad, numbers 5, 6, and 7, the undercurrent is anxiety. And I don't mean that in like a clinical mental health sense necessarily. What I mean by that is like a question of, will I have enough or is there enough? It's sort of a resource-based question. That's what I mean by anxiety. The shame question, the undercurrent for the heart triad is more, am I enough? It's like personally rooted in their identity. For the head triad, it's more about the things that they have, the resources, etc. And then for the gut triad, the undercurrent is frustration, 8, 9, and 1. And the way I like to say that is, enough! Like, I've had enough of this. Like, the world is not as I want it to be. And so I am always on this kind of circuit of trying to make it the way I want it to be, but it's never the way I want it to be. So the undercurrent that I'm always wrestling with is frustration. So that's kind of a breakdown of the 9 numbers and how they're all grouped together in their various triads and why. It would take a long time to go through every number, but I think what I'd say is that every number has a compulsion, which means like something that they are fundamentally obsessed with and something that they are fundamentally avoiding. It's like 2 sides of a coin. So let me use myself. So as a 4 in the heart triad, the undercurrent is shame. And the compulsion for me, the obsession is with being unique or special. And the avoidance is avoiding anything ordinary. I have to avoid ordinariness and I must be extraordinary or special, the 2 sides of the coin. So every single number in the Enneagram, based on their triad, is going to have a certain compulsion that is seeking, again, below the surface of awareness, that is seeking to address that undercurrent in some kind of way. And I should also add that this is not because I'm a healthy 4, you're about to see this in action. I have not uniquely come up with this framework myself. It's very heavily based and stolen from a book, a 1970s book, actually called The Enneagram by a priest and 2 other religious people. And it was like, ironically, one of the best books on the Enneagram from a Christian perspective that I've ever read. And I just found it this past year. And so they talk about the compulsion. That language, compulsion, is from that book.
Yeah. Well, you've got two other numbers here. Maybe instead of 9, we'll go through 3 since we represent each tribe. I mean, I'm happy to talk a little
You're
bit
happy
about
to meet for me to speak to you who you are.
Yeah, yeah. I won't
Okay.
speak for Melinda,
Well,
but I'm game.
Well, and before you dive into that, I just want to, because at first when I was hearing these words, I really had strong resistance to being boxed in
yeah,
as well, and people using it as an excuse to be a jerk. Well, I'm a duh,
yeah,
or he's a and so therefore I act like, and it's been prescriptive rather
yeah,
than just helpful and illuminative, if that's a word. I just made it up. That's
yeah,
cool. Illuminative. Ooh, is that a new word? Ooh. Anyway, I like it. I think I'm unique enough. 4 is in me. I'm 7, 2, and 4. But anyway, and even compulsion, that word is like, I don't have any compulsions. I just want to speak to people that are hearing this for the first
yeah,
time, that we get, this is a flyover. And it's taken me like 3 or 4 years to be okay with these kind of diagnostic. It's not diagnostic either. It's, again,
yeah,
it's illuminative, and or whatever that word is I just made up, but illumination of characteristics of ourselves that can lead to greater awareness of ourself, rather than this is who you
yeah,
are, so this is how you have to fit. So even the word compulsion could really trigger people, and like, I'm not compulsive, I don't have OCD. So even
yeah,
just want to
yeah,
soften that again, because I have heard you teach on the Enneagram for a couple of days and read other books as well. So, but
yeah.
some people may be hearing this for the first time. I just wanted to soften some things so that they can be receptive to what you're saying, Suhail, and
Yes,
not
yeah.
feel like, well, you just said I'm full of shame or compulsion. And yeah, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, to kind of normalize
Totally. Yeah,
things.
let me speak to that. So the reason I think first of all, that makes a whole lot of sense what you've said and wanting to soften it, and I think that's very appropriate. So when I use the words like undercurrent and compulsion, part of why I think those words can be helpful is because they describe something happening that is sometimes outside of the realm of our consciousness. Like it's sort of like instinct, and we may not fully understand or know what is happening or why. It's just like a go-to. Like, why do we show up these ways? Well, we don't really know. And that's what makes it an undercurrent or a compulsion that we're dealing with. So it's something to describe something we're often not aware of. That's what I use those words for. The second thing, and this is from a Christian perspective, and again, very rooted in the book that I alluded to, is that we cannot free ourselves. We are often not even aware of like the places of stuckness or enslavement or just lack of freedom, and we need a conversion that can only come from God's Spirit. We need a freedom or a liberation that only God can bring about. So I like the idea of that, because that is a big part of the gospel, is that we cannot save ourselves, and sometimes we don't even know that we need saving. We think the way we are is actually virtuous. And so I think those words are kind of in that direction. They're not probably perfect words, so if you or your listeners have better recommendations, I'd love to know. But in terms of you, Melinda, so you are in the head
And then you
triad.
make
So
sure you
I
cover
said,
Cathy too.
oh, okay, I'll cover Cathy, yeah. And then you can tell me how this resonates. But if you are a 7, so 7s are in the head triad. The undercurrent for a 7 in the head triad would be anxiety, like I've defined it. Will I have enough? Is there enough? So the way the 7s deal with that is kind of unique in the head triad space, because they're, what anxiety? What do you mean there's not enough? Like it's almost, and again, it's not conscious, but it's like, I'm not anxious. Look at all the fun I'm having. Look at all the great things I'm doing. Look at all the plans I've made for celebration and joy. It's kind of like, what anxiety? That's the way the 7s will cope. And so their compulsion on one side of the coin would be the need to have fun. And the avoidance would be to avoid anything that would reek to them of not being fun or conflict, anything that would be too deep or too intense, which, credit to you, you must be a healthy 7 because you're in this work. doing this podcast. So that's good. So that's what I would say for you as a 7. Okay. And then for you, Cathy, as an 8, you're in the gut triad. So the undercurrent for the gut triad is that feeling of frustration. There's a deep desire for autonomy. Like, I want things to be the way I want them to be. And for an 8 specifically, it's the compulsion would be, I want to avoid weakness at all costs, and I must be strong at all costs. That's at least how the Enneagram would sort of describe what's going on under the hood, you know? So anyway, that's the gist of how the Enneagram would treat a 7 and an 8. I won't say how it would treat you because only you can answer how you are, but that's what it would say.
It's interesting because I was exploring potentially having a bit of a leadership coach, because things with what we're doing with the Face Network and the Emmanuel Institute are growing, and with it, I want to make sure that I'm keeping up with the growth as a leader. And so I had some conversations and got connected with somebody who is a coach and is a woman who works with women leaders. And I connected with her and thought we'd do a little bit of a coaching thing. And we were going to train her. She's going to coach me. And, and she had all these assessments for the onboarding, right? And it included Ian Cron? Ian Cron. His big assessment is it costs some money to do, and you get like this 24-page report and all that. But we were talking about the results and all. I actually had a chance to meet her between doing it and this conversation, and met her in person. And she said, Cathy, I don't know if you want to be coached.
There you go.
Because you're very independent and very confident and very competent and capable. And I'm like, yeah, because it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I had something very specific I was looking for, and we thought that was it. And then it was like,
Yeah.
don't think you're really wanting this. And I'm like, no. But it was interesting because she was able to assess that from all the intake stuff that I did. I was like, okay, this really isn't the fit. But I do love having I do want to be seen and known by people who get what I do or get the level of responsibility or leadership that I walk in. That's important to me, but that wasn't where I was going to find it. So that's interesting assessment, this whole independence thing. And I have been my whole life. I kind of grew up alone in a big family because I was like a surprise way later. And it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's very common for anyone in the gut triad to have that drive for independence or autonomy, for sure.
Well, I know we could talk about this for days because there's books and podcasts, but I want to ask one more question as a wrap up, and if Cathy has any, but why is it important for people to have some kind of understanding on this deeper level of wiring and personality using the Enneagram?
Yeah. Great question. Well, I think for a few reasons. One is because without self-awareness, it's really hard to progress in our spiritual awareness or our life with God. If we're blind or ignorant or avoiding certain things that have a significant play in our life, we are not going to be able to open up those parts of us to God for God's spirit and love to encounter. So I think that's one big thing is just to encourage and nurture our own self-awareness is really a vital thing, a necessary thing in our spiritual life. And I mean that in not just a negative sense too, like to know what's, beating in my own heart and the gifts that God has deposited in me. Those things need to be, at the front of our awareness as well. It just so happens that it's so much easier to ignore or deny or avoid the shadow bits of ourselves, So that's one reason. The other reason is because we don't have any hope to relate well with other people if we don't have some grid for what is motivating them or why they do the things they do or why they are the way they are, for that matter. Like if I don't know in a conversation or a group that this person is showing up with an undercurrent of anxiety about whether there will be enough. And I just blow right past that because of my own preoccupations or whatever. That is not actually learning to love that person well and to work well with that person. You know, I mean, any kind of relationship demands us to be kind of insightful and curious about the other person, to be compassionate about the other person, ultimately to love the other person. And that just cannot happen till we have an idea of who that person is, like what's going on in them and why they are the way they are. So I would say for me, and I would like emphasize this, that as not only human beings, but just as Christians who seek to be people who love as God loves, who receive the love of God and who can share the love of God, I just don't think it's possible to do that with a high degree of self-awareness. Yeah, so I feel really strongly that, and this is not just me, again, not a unique thought, but like in the history of Christian spiritual formation, there is an overarching and overwhelming chorus of people saying like, you cannot know God unless you know yourself, or unless you know yourself, you will not know God. And throw that into the mix of we can't really know other people and love other people unless we have some awareness of who they are, right? So I would say the Enneagram is probably not the only way to do that, but it is quite an elegant framework. It allows for a lot of movement. It's not intended to box you in. It's actually intended to bring you to freedom and wholeness. Oh, okay. So in this situation, I'm likely going to want to be unique. There's going to be some compulsion here to show that I'm so unique in whatever situation I find myself. I'm probably going to have to be doing that because of some undercurrents of shame. Okay, so Lord, I bring to you that shame of, for some reason, not being good enough or being enough. Would you love me in that? Lord, I bring to you this need to be unique, to get attention from people. Would you love me in that? Okay, now I can sort of show up in a more wholesome, grounded place, right? So I think as a Christian, it's really helpful because it can actually create greater freedom and movement in our lives with God and ourselves and others.
Yeah. I love that you use the word elegant.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's countless personality tests, but I've done several of them. And
Yeah.
I feel like this one is really, it gives me the best target for where I need to continue to grow. And I'm good with that. Like, I know my energy can get really big and I feel like it's passion and it can scare people. And so I have to be careful and
Right.
communicate better and not allow things to get really big, because my energy can
Yeah.
get big in my passion. And so it's nice to
Yeah.
have mirrors held up, as painful as they are, but it helps us to see how others experience us so that we can be the best versions of ourselves. But
Yeah.
like Melinda said, we could talk forever and ever. And I just want to thank you for your time and just the beautiful gift that you are to the conversation that is this podcast, and adding your voice, and for the tenderness and gentleness of your heart, and for showing up so beautifully for us and for our audience, and giving us some really solid things to hang on to with spiritual formation, and also a little bit of an understanding of the Enneagram. So maybe people will be a little bit more open to maybe checking it out.
Well, and Suhail, I know that you are passionate about writing. And so can you share, and you write wonderfully. I've seen your website. So could you share how people can get to know you more and experience more of your wisdom and teaching? Where can they find you?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I do have a website. It's writingisprayer.ca, I want to say. Is it CA? I think it is CA. I should know my own website address.
Writingisprayer.com. .com.
.com.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I have it pulled up.
Let's incorporate. Let's make that more corporate. Was probably my decision-making process. Writingisprayer.com. So that's sort of a catch-all for, in the past, some more personal, vulnerable writing I've done. I talk about like There's some links to, the School of Spiritual Direction cohorts that I'm teaching, various other things that I'm involved with. There's a link to our community, our contemplative community, West End Abbey, which is also westendabbey.ca. I know that is a CA. That's our faith community. And that's really an effort to try to build something grounded in the ethos of spiritual direction and the contemplative Christian practices. Yeah, so I think those would be two places where people could read. And yeah, thank you. I guess one more thing. Can I say one more thing about the Enneagram? I just want to make it clear that although say one more thing about the Enneagram, I just darker, shadowy sides of our Enneagram is really good also at affirming the very beautiful and even the things that image out God and the divine in us. It's just that I really find like the shadow bits are the things that often we overlook and don't pay a lot of attention to, and are often the things that keep us the most stuck. So from that conversion, that metanoia, to use the New Testament word perspective, that's kind of how I'm leaning in contextualizing the Enneagram. But it's not all, rain clouds and stormy weather if you check out the Enneagram. So I wanted to say that.
Good to know. Well, Thank you so much, Suhail, and what a great gift you've been. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Well, congratulations on making it this far. Thank you for listening, for watching. We so appreciate your support.
Yeah, and we got a lot of great content coming your way, so make sure that you are subscribed, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Face to Face podcast. For more resources and information, please visit facetofacenetwork.org.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review. It helps others discover tools for deeper connection and lasting freedom. We will see you next time.